Hello there, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan, and I hope you're staying warm because the weather outside is weather. When we think about the Jedi as powerful combatants, we oftentimes focus on their individual ability in one-on-one combat. We think about offensive techniques like force push, mental abilities like Jedi mind tricks, or passive buffs like precognition that allow a Jedi to sense incoming dangers like blaster bolts. But that's how you think when you're only used to fighting people one-on-one or in small little skirmishes. That's how the Jedi as peacekeepers were trained to operate. They were taught to see every individual life as precious and meaningful, and would go to extraordinary lengths to protect and serve them. That's what makes the Jedi a beacon of hope in the galaxy, and it's also what makes them completely ill-equipped for the battlefield, because unfortunately, on the battlefield, the individual means very little. They are just tiny cogs in a large war machine, and the Jedi didn't really shift their mindset properly to adjust to this reality. And that was a bad thing because all the individual powers a Jedi can use on just one droid or even a group of droid is meaningless compared to their most powerful ability, which they often never used during the Clone Wars, and that was battlefield meditation. A military leader who has a Jedi in their command can put a Jedi at the front in the vanguard to tackle difficult situations and hard-to-win positions. Anakin Skywalker is perfect for such a role. He is kinetic, his connection to the Force is pure and flowing with energy. This makes him an excellent fighter, and he definitely boosts the morale of frontline troops when he engages, but only the troops that can see him fighting, which is a pretty small amount when you consider how large some of these battlefields were. They spanned across entire continents, entire planets, entire systems. But there is another type of Jedi, one that is far more cerebral. Think like a Professor X style Jedi. An individual that might not be the most powerful when it comes to telekinesis or Force lightning, but is one with the Force in a way that their consciousness and mind can go deeply into the cosmic energy and reach out and connect with others. There have always been Force users all throughout history like this, the Sith Lord Naga Shadow or Jedi Master Bastila Shan, and while they each were terrific individual combatants in their own right, it was their ability to use battlefield meditation that made them indispensable on the battlefield. A Force user with this capability doesn't just affect a small part of the battlefield, they can coordinate entire ground forces, entire fleets, entire planetary invasions, or multi-system campaigns. One of the biggest challenges that military forces face on the battlefield, especially before these modern, battlefield network systems were created, was coordinating complex movement with different units, infantry, armor, air support. In World War II, we saw the importance and power of combined arms tactics and maneuver warfare as the German army broke through Belgium and then outmaneuvered and flanked the much more powerful but more static French army. Well, a Force user that can use battlefield meditation basically fulfills the wildest dream of any military commander. A Jedi or a Sith with battlefield meditation abilities can even buff their soldiers mentally and provide sharp reactions, more battlefield awareness, suppress fear, boost morale. The Sith were even more chaotic in how they used this power. They could basically create fear or panic in enemy ranks by just projecting horrible images into their heads, driving them mad. Naga Shadow during the Great Hyperspace War managed to make his smaller Sith army and fleet look massive thanks to the creation of large illusions that could even do some minimum damage to enemy forces. On the flip side, the disruption of those illusions is what ultimately led to Naga Shadow's defeat. So battlefield meditation, it is the ultimate Force multiplier. It gives you a clear God's eye view of the battlefield and allows you to coordinate things at a level that is almost impossible without advanced networking technology. It completely changes how much influence the individual Jedi or Sith can have. So why didn't the Jedi Order use this technique during the Clone Wars? If you look at the setup for the Clone Wars, the Jedi and Republic were completely caught off guard with their pants down when the Separatists launched their invasion on the Outer Rim. Yes, the clone army was well trained and well equipped, but the Jedi commanders that were supposed to lead them into battlefield lacked traditional military upbringing and training and education. They just weren't capable leaders. And even the skilled Jedi who actually knew how to fight, they didn't know how to coordinate massive fleets and armies across multiple systems. This is just something you're not able to do without training and having a existing infrastructure there to aid you. Battlefield meditation could have completely compensated for such a shortage. The Jedi wasted their capabilities by leading from the front. Oftentimes, Jedi would charge directly at enemy forces without any consideration for the men that have to follow them, who don't have supernatural speed and the ability to dodge or deflect incoming blaster bolts. In general, it's not a good idea to see your commanding officer fighting in hand-to-hand combat on the front. Usually that means the situation has gone completely sideways and your headquarter unit has been overrun and someone is about to to call broken arrow over the comms and send a few acclimators overhead for some base stealth to 0. Now, a lot of Jedi commanders wanted to stay at the front for romantic and, pretty admirable reasons. Anakin Skywalker wanted to be with his men. He actually did try his best to keep the clones fighting with him safe. But again, battlefield meditation could have made sure that he understood where all of his men were and what they needed to effectively fight across the entire battlefield. If you're stuck at the front dodging blaster bolts and you're leading a Legion-sized unit, another company on the other side of the line, on the other side of the continent, could be getting overrun. And because you aren't coordinating your reserves and mechanized units at a much larger operational level view, you're not going to be able to properly reinforce units that need help. The clone troopers were already excellent soldiers who had terrific morale. Now imagine if they could all be directed by one individual and work together in the same way a droid army does. And this is the beauty of battlefield meditation. You don't have to actually take over the minds of every individual. It's more like you're just a warm presence at the back of their head giving them suggestions. Well, actually, no, the Sith did completely take over the minds of their soldiers sometimes. They would send their thralls on suicidal charges against Republic lines, and that does require a lot more concentration. And from a Jedi point of view, it would probably seem unethical to them to do this. Instead, with the clones, you can just apply gentle pressure that keeps them focused and in the right place on the battlefield while they still maintain their own independence at a tactical level. And so you have the same level of operational control as a droid commander would have over their army, but you have far better fighters who are able to organically react to the situation on the ground. It's the best of both worlds. The Republic was completely outnumbered during these early years of the conflict, and they also fielded very expensive and I would argue irreplaceable units, and so getting the most out of their troopers through techniques like battlefield meditation was a no-brainer. Any technique that could reduce Republic casualties or increase efficiency would have paid massive dividends over a prolonged war. And again, this is not a hypothetical thing, that I'm just making up. I mean, all throughout the Old Republic, all throughout the many Force wars fought between the Jedi and Sith, this capability won battles. It was very important. As mentioned before, the Sith Lord Nagasato almost took Coruscant using a relatively small fleet and army thanks to this technique. And during the Jedi Civil War, Bastila Shan's use of battlefield meditation was instrumental at turning the tide against the Sith. The Separatist droid army specifically were terrifying not because individual units were brilliant, but because they were networked. They shared targeting data, executed synchronized maneuvers, and can respond to battlefield changes instantaneously. This is exactly the type of opponent that battlefield meditation thrives against. By enhancing clone reaction time, coordination, and situational awareness, Jedi could have created an organic equivalent to a droid battle network without relying on vulnerable centralized computers. And unlike conscripted civilians with more of a sense of individuality, clone troopers were uniquely suited to this type of fighting. And if you've seen our video about why space battles are so difficult for humans, you'll know that battlefield meditation is especially effective at coordinating fleet movements. Humans were not really designed to fight in a three-dimensional vertical space. Our eyes are really focused forwards. We have peripheral vision, but only to the sides really. We can't really see above us and below us. And that's because we usually walk on the ground and we don't have a brain and senses evolved for 3D maneuvering like bats or fish, who both map their surroundings with echolocation or sensing water pressure changes. Without advanced omnidirectional sensory input, humans are just not evolved to fight in this way. There's a reason why the aquatic Mon Calamari in Star Wars are famous for being excellent fleet commanders, and that is because they are born in an aquatic 3D environment, so they naturally know how to maneuver and fight in these environments. Starfighter combat in Star Wars is essentially asking a bunch of ground-based primates to fight like birds, and so it's not easy. Even simple things like establishing which direction is which can be very hard and make coordination in space battles almost impossible. Battlefield meditation solves all of this because, again, the Force user who is doing the meditation has a God's eye view of the entire battlefield, and that awareness can be then projected into the minds of every individual fighting within the battle meld. Allows humanoids to act like fish in a school, which I think is really cool. So why didn't the Jedi use this technique during the Clone Wars? Well, only a tiny fraction of Force users can actually perform it safely. I think out of all the Jedi during the late period of the Republic, we can only say that Yoda and a few other high council members would be capable of using this technique. But even if you have the capability of using this technique, it probably takes years to train your mind to have the endurance and discipline to actually carry out this this performance during a very heated battle. Because this technique places a very intense load on your brain and your body. You have to have massive amounts of concentration that could exhaust unprepared individuals. I mean, take a look at what happened to Luke after he did that whole Force illusion thing. It's like watching a middle-aged dad try to play tag football on Thanksgiving weekend without stretching. And during the Old Republic period, people who specialized in battlefield meditation, they specialized in it for most of their adult lives. I mean, it took a long time to really train people to do this stuff, and it was a rare technique. And should a Jedi or Sith meditator's connection to their military force fail in the middle of a battle because of lack of skill, what was a huge advantage and a well-coordinated force suddenly becomes a disorganized rabble because of that severance. It's like going from being immersed in a warm bath to being dunked into cold water. It is shocking, and yeah, a lot of forces rout when that battlefield meditation is broken. And we have to remember that the Jedi Order had become dogmatic and pacifist during the post-Crusade Reformation period. The more institutionally rigid they became, the more philosophically conservative, the less they invested in such techniques. And let's be honest, in a world at peace, battlefield meditation isn't exactly needed. If anything, a bad actor, a bad Jedi could use battlefield meditation to take over entire towns and parts of Coruscant, which could be very unethical and lead to even worse things happening. The Jedi of old were far more practical as they constantly were facing an existential crisis from the Sith and their military forces. The Jedi of the High Republic period were ideological and started straying away from anything that could lead to the dark side. That included battlefield meditation because it was simply too powerful. But even certain lightsaber techniques, and I'm not just talking about Juyo, even dueling forms like Makasi were frowned upon by the Jedi of this period. They were pretty extreme. And so the Jedi of this era would have viewed battlefield meditation as something that strips away the individual will of the soldiers you're commanding. And that, again, is not something the Jedi were comfortable with doing during this period of time. Now, obviously, if you grew up in a period where you're constantly fighting off Sith hordes and you see how much more capable a Republic soldier is with a battlefield meld, you might be more inclined to use it because in many ways it might save that soldier's life and make them much more effective. At the same time, Palpatine was also degrading the Jedi's foresight, introducing noise into force perception and clouding the Jedi's ability to sense things, making the use of such techniques even more difficult. And also because disrupting battlefield meditation was so devastating to a military force, you actually needed to develop doctrine and infrastructure to protect your Jedi Force meditator. Nega Shadow actually had a special ship built for him to amplify his battlefield meditation capabilities. You also need to develop a guard force to specifically protect the Jedi meditator. In other words, you turn your fleet into something that basically follows droid command ship doctrine, which is exactly the opposite of what the Republic fleet was built for, right? This was a carrier fleet that was mainly used to retake lost Republic worlds. There's usually no defense in depth because the Republic lacked capital ships and often used their carriers as frontline vessels. The Republic would have to redesign their fleet and potentially build much larger super carriers or have stealth ships like the one Anakin used to run the blockade at Christophsis in order to protect a Force meditator. And lastly, being connected to the minds of millions of clone troopers as they struggle and die in combat is probably not healthy for the individual who is coordinating everything. The clones are brave, that is for sure, but they are human. And a Jedi who is constantly exposed to all that emotion on the battlefield becomes burnt out and potentially emotionally unstable, which could lead to the dark side. And so this is why the Jedi didn't use their most powerful capability on the battlefield during the Clone Wars. It is a reflection in many ways of how weak the Jedi have become over the years because they rejected their past and true nature of their order. If the Jedi chose to stand in the light against the dark, then they have to fight. And to handicap yourself when going into a life or death battle, well, that is a fool's game. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy. I'll see you next time.